1:15. This is the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. Here's the news edited and read by Ramesh Peris. Headlines. President Ranil Wickremesinghe issuing a statement on COP27 says the biggest obstacle to success has been politicization and stagnation. The World Bank assures continuous support to Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka in discussion with the World Bank and the ADB to secure nearly $2 billion. Day 7 of the committee stage debate of the 2023 budget continues in Parliament. The special distribution of kerosene oil to agricultural areas commences. The subcommittee proposal on power sector reforms to be presented to the National Council. In news overseas, Alzheimer's drug lecanemab hailed as momentous breakthrough. In sports, it's cricket, Dhoni to replace Lakshan as Lanka hope to bounce back in the final ODI today. Now the local news in detail. Having participated in the COP27 United Nations Climate Change Conference in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt earlier this month, President Ranil Wickremesinghe issued a statement on Tuesday on its outcome. The president was critical of the countries who were historically accountable for the greatest damage and who are capable of meaningful contributions but who have stymied the furtherance of climate action. President Wickremesinghe said that regrettably the biggest obstacle to success has been politicization and stagnation. The president emphasized that for 27 years, world leaders have been meeting under the COP framework to confront the greatest threat to the future of humanity, climate change. He stressed that once again, the agreements reached at COP27 failed to place the nations of the world on a complementary and progressive course of redress. He underscored for the conference of parties to be relevant, sustainable progress must be made at COP28, otherwise it is best to dismantle COP. Prime Minister Dinesh Gunawardena held discussions with World Bank Country Director Cheo Kanda and senior strategy and operations officials about the progress of ongoing projects and proposed future projects. The Prime Minister briefed the delegation about the steps taken by the government to overcome economic challenges and said the new reforms would result in early conclusion of monetary arrangements with the International Monetary Fund. World Bank Director expressed satisfaction over the short-term measures to ease the economic situation and stressed the need for continuous mid-term and long-term efforts. She assured continuous support to Sri Lanka. Day 7 of the committee stage debate of the 2023 budget got underway in Parliament this morning. Explained heads of the Ministries of Industries, Trade, Commerce and Food Security and Plantation Industries are scheduled to be debated between 9:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. today. The committee stage debate will continue for 13 days until 8th of December. The final vote on the 2023 budget is scheduled to take place at 5 p.m. on the 8th of December. According to the 2023 budget estimates, the total revenue and grants is expected to be 3,415 billion rupees. The total expenditure is estimated to be 5,819 billion rupees. Accordingly, the government is aiming to reduce the budget deficit to 7.9% next year from an estimated 9.8% this year. This news broadcast comes to you from the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. Sri Lanka is reportedly in discussion with the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank to secure nearly $2 billion. Sri Lanka has already reached a staff-level agreement with the International Monetary Fund for $2.9 billion program, which now requires the IMF board approval. According to the Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe, Sri Lanka is seeking to complete the debt restructuring talks and obtain the IMF board approval in January. Meanwhile, former Governor of the Central Bank, Indrajit Kumaraswamy, said once the IMF board approval is given, multilateral lenders such as World Bank and the ADB will be able to resume lending to Sri Lanka. MP Namal Rajapaksa says the proposals of the National Council Subcommittee on National Policies pertaining to the report compiled by the Cabinet-appointed Committee on Power Sector Reforms in Sri Lanka will be presented to the National Council on December 8. The report was handed over to the chairman of the subcommittee on identifying the priorities in formulation of short, medium and long-term national policies. On Monday, it received the approval of the cabinet ministers. This report contains recommendations that offer solutions to a number of concerns faced in the electricity sector in Sri Lanka, including power outages and excessive increase in electricity tariffs caused by the inability to meet the daily increasing electricity demand. The Ceylon Electricity Board will impose 2-hour and 20-minute power cuts in all residential areas today as well. Accordingly, groups A to L and P to W will experience a 1-hour power cut during the day and 1-hour and 20-minute power disruption at night. And that ends local news.
The main news story is brought to you by Siddhalepa Vedamahatmya.
Moving on to the main news story. The special program to distribute kerosene oil to all agricultural areas has commenced. The President's Media Division said the joint program was launched through the provincial chief secretaries and the district secretaries to leave no one behind. The Presidential Director General Community Affairs, Kirti Tenakon, said the program to distribute kerosene to all agricultural areas in Sri Lanka will be initiated using the same mechanism that was used to solve the fishermen's kerosene problem. And that was the main news story.
The main news story was brought to you by Siddhalepa Vedamahatmya.
Watch Life is brought to you by
Tertiary and Vocational Education Commission.
In Watchlight, Minister of Transport Bandula Gunawardena says the railway services between Mahava and Jaffna suspended for 5 months from January 15, 2023 due to repair work on the line. The minister said steps will be taken to restore the dilapidated railway track. The Transport Minister assured that the renovation work will be completed within 5 months. A special bus transport service from Mahava to Jaffna will be operated for the affected train passengers. And that came to you in Watchlight. Are you employed, self-employed or in business? Achieve career goals by gaining an NVQ certificate for full vocational qualifications with experience in your field through recognition of prior learning, RPL, or NVQ Competency Unit Certificate through the Flexible Learning Mode for a Vocational Competency Unit. For further details, inquire the Skills Development Officers, Career Guidance Officers in your nearest Divisional Secretariat offices or the registered and accredited training providers in public or private sector. Visit www.tvec.gov.lk for further information. This is
World News, brought to you by courtesy of
We give you the strength to rise higher and higher.
Never step back, but always march forward.
Empowering you to reach greater heights. People's Leasing, the trusted leader.
moving on to the bulletin of world news. First, the headlines. Alzheimer's drug lecanemab hailed as momentous breakthrough. Former Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison censured over secret ministries. China sends new crew to Tiangong space station. Now the world news in detail. The first drug to slow the destruction of the brain in Alzheimer's has been heralded as momentous and historic. The research breakthrough ends decades of failure and shows a new era of drugs to treat Alzheimer's, the most common form of dementia, is possible. Yet the medicine, lecanemab, has only a small effect and its impact on people's daily lives is debated. And the drug works in the early stages of the disease, so most would miss out without a revolution in spotting it. Lecanemab attacks the sticky gunge called beta-amyloid that builds up in the brains of people with Alzheimer's. For a medical field littered with duds, despair and disappointment, some see these trial results as a triumphant turning point. Former Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison has been censured by the nation's parliament for giving himself secret powers while in office. The historic motion follows a damning report which said his actions were corrosive of trust in government. It marks the first time a former Prime Minister has been censured by the House of Representatives. Mr. Morrison has defended appointing himself to several ministries, calling the censure retribution by opponents. In August, it emerged that Mr. Morrison had become Joint Minister for Health, Finance, Treasury, Home Affairs and Resources in the 2 years before he lost power in May. 3 Chinese astronauts have taken off for the Tiangong space station to make its first in-orbit crew handover. It will be the second permanently inhabited space outpost after the NASA-led International Space Station from which China was excluded in 2011. The fresh crew will live on the station for 6 months, taking over from 3 colleagues who arrived in June. There will be a week-long handover period, in part to trial the station's ability to house 6 astronauts. The new crew lifted off on Tuesday in the Shenzhou 15 spacecraft or Divine Vessel from the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center in the Gobi Desert in the northwest China. Back to the headlines of the world news. Alzheimer's drug Lecaine map hailed as momentous breakthrough. Former Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison censured over secret ministries. And China sends new crew to Tiangong space station. And that concludes World News.
World News. Brought to you by courtesy of...
Amidst all challenges, we will rally around you and advance.
In the face of hardships, let's stand strong together.
Empowering you to reach greater heights. People's listening, the trusted leader.
In development news, high-spending tourists arrived in Sri Lanka on Tuesday on board the luxury passenger cruise ship Mayan Chef 5. Over 2,000 tourists arrived on the ship and were welcomed at the Colombo port. Tourism Minister Harin Fernando said that the ship brought high-spending tourists. He said the tourists had made bookings for several events while in Sri Lanka. Hapag-Lloyd Lanka, a joint venture between 18 Spence plc and TUI, ushered in the super luxury cruise Mayan Chef 5 at the Colombo port. The cruise will be calling on the Hambantota port later today. And that was development news. Moving on to sports news. First, football. FIFA World Cup 2022. 4 more games of the 2022 World Cup will be held in Qatar today. The United States won their World Cup grudge match against Iran as Christian Pulisic scored the winner to set up the last 16 tie with the Netherlands. Meanwhile, Marcus Rashford inspired England to the victory required to top Group B and ensure it was despair for Wales as they went out of the tournament after a bitterly disappointing World Cup campaign. England now face Senegal in the last 16 on Sunday. In other sports news, cricket, Sri Lanka will take on Afghanistan in the third and final one-day international of the series this afternoon. The game will get underway at the Pallekele International Cricket Stadium at 2:30 p.m. Sri Lanka team is expected to make one change today, and the game is going to be played on a new wicket, which will turn to the spinners than in the previous 2 games. Dunit Velalage, the spin bowling all-rounder, is going to play today's game, and he will replace the fast bowling all-rounder Dhananjay Lakshan, who played in the second one-day last Sunday. And that was sports news.
The fastest way to earn the highest interest, an interest rate of 22% in 4 months. NSB, the safest place for your money.
Business News. Sponsored by National Savings Bank, the safest place for your money.
Moving on to business news, Lav's Gas, one of the largest LP gas suppliers in Sri Lanka, is currently operating at maximum capacity, filling and distributing its LP gas cylinders island-wide to restore the current market supply. In the recent past, the market supply was challenged due to several macro-environmental factors. By resolving most of the financial challenges created from the macroeconomic outset, Lav's Gas able to secure adequate LC facilities to import LPG to the country. Customers can visit their closest Lav's Gas dealer or inquire about stocks available by contacting Lav's Customer Care Service by dialing 1345. And that was business news.
Business News. Sponsored by National Savings Bank, the safest place for your money.
The fastest way to earn the highest interest, an interest rate of 22% in 4 months. NSB, the safest place for your money.
Saving money isn't easy when you have responsibility. That's why we promise to give you the best returns and guarantee on your investment. LOLC Finance Fixed Deposits. Maximize your savings. LOLC Finance PLC, incorporated on the 13th of December 2001, is rated SLA stable by ICRA Lanka Limited and is licensed by the Monetary Board of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka under the Finance Business Act number 42 of 2011.
In economic news, the Export Development Board says, as per data released by Sri Lanka Customs, the earnings from merchandise exports have exceeded $11 billion from January to October 2022. According to the EDB, this is a growth of 9.33% in comparison to the same period in 2021. The earnings from merchandise exports in the first 10 months of last year were recorded as $10 million. The ADB said further in a press release on Sri Lanka's export performance for the month of October 2022, the impact of the global crisis also affected the decrease in export earnings of major products. And that was economic news. The weather report is next. Finally, moving on to the weather report, the Meteorological Department forecast showers or thunder showers to occur at few places in the Uva, Sabaragama provinces and in the Galle and Mathura districts during the afternoon or night. Mainly fair weather will prevail elsewhere over the country. And that was the weather report. And to end this main news broadcast, a recap of the headlines. President Ranil Wickremesinghe issuing a statement on COP27 says the biggest obstacle to success has been politicization and stagnation. The World Bank assures continuous support to Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka in discussion with the World Bank and the ADB to secure nearly $2 billion. Day 7 of the committee stage debate of the 2023 budget continues in Parliament today. The special distribution of kerosene oil to agricultural areas commences. The subcommittee proposals on power sector reforms to be presented to the National Council. In news overseas, Alzheimer's drug lecanemab hailed as momentous breakthrough. In sports, it's cricket, Dunit to replace Lakshan as Lanka hope to bounce back in the final ODI today. And with that, we conclude this news broadcast from the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation.